Good afternoon. I'd just like to take a few minutes today to talk about starting a nonprofit. There are just some things I'd like you to consider. This won't take long, but I do think that there's some elements that I'd like to discuss with you just to bring up some things that when you're dealing with a nonprofit, there is a difference between a nonprofit and a profit company. I think the first step in developing a nonprofit is to find out what how is your service or needed within the community. And I think that means you have to identify how your organization is going to fit within the community. You don't want to duplicate existing operations that some people are doing. So basically, you want to provide something that's either compatible with those existing things or services and organizations, or you want to provide something that's more necessary and that's available. It's going to make an impact, okay? So I would suggest that you make a list of current organizations within the community, what the services they provide, and if it's usually organizations have a main service, but they have additional services also. So I would kind of number them in order. So if I have an organization, say United Way, what is their main service? And then what other services do they provide in addition to the main service or the main purpose of their organization? I think I'd like to just mention a little bit about a difference between the nonprofit and the profit. We all know that a profit company or a profit organization is there to make money, and that's the purpose, whether they're selling products or services. In a nonprofit structure, a nonprofit is run by a board of directors. The board of directors then in turn hires the executive director to work for the board. The board then actually makes most of the decisions relating to the organization, and the director carries out those decisions to include those in activities and fundraising or whatever is necessary. So basically, the director is kind of an employee of the board. Usually within the bylaws, the board time frame is structured, which means that a board, usually in the bylaws, it's listed how long a board member can be on the board of the organization. It also sometimes structures how long a director can be considered before evaluation. Those things are part of how you will develop your bylaws when you start actually creating the purpose of the organization. Usually the director is paid a salary by the organization, and all decisions are made by the board at board meetings, but they're carried out by the director. The director can be a board member, but usually they are not a voting member. Other differences between the nonprofit and the profit are when a profit dissolves or sells or whatever, their assets can be sold. They can make money off of those assets. Whereas a nonprofit, when it dissolves or ends, those assets, naturally after those have been paid, they have to be given to another organization, another nonprofit. They cannot make money by selling them, so they have to distribute them to another nonprofit. And actually, that's the difference between a profit and a nonprofit, just as the name kind of implies. Other differences, I want to talk a little bit about how things are looked at from a funding standpoint. In a nonprofit will apply for a 501c3 or 501c6, which means that anybody who gives a contribution or a donation to that nonprofit can count that as tax exempt on their individual company or personal tax forms. The 501c3 application is separate from actually creating the nonprofit organization, and those forms can be supplied to you in the resource area of this website, and also through the blogs, which goes through the actual process of how to apply for those forms. As an example of that, a corporation or a bank might buy a table at a nonprofit luncheon, so they would say pay $500. After the expenses of that is kind of figured out to be $300 by the nonprofit, and therefore that company or bank can declare that $200 of that was actually a sponsorship or a contribution, and declare it as such on their individual or their company tax forms. Again, like I mentioned, a company or a profit company or business files a tax form. It's called corporate taxing. They can, sometimes it's a Schedule C. There's additional information that's provided out with the tax form that goes to the IRS. Nonprofits have to fill out a different form. It's called a 990 to the IRS. And what that says is that it's yearly, it shows their fiscal year. And it's based on their fiscal year. And it's based on the activities that they've done, the expenses that they've incurred, the donations and contributions that they've received, along with that fiscal form, fiscal information form, the 990. You have to send a list to the board of directors, which I mentioned earlier, and also any organizational activities. This is then reported to the IRS, but there's a list of the nonprofits that is open to the public for public view. So therefore, it's important that the 990s actually go out on a public website, and they therefore it's important that the board members again know that they are, that they have been declaring themselves as board members publicly. I want to talk a little bit about developing a mission, which is kind of one of the primary things you have to consider when you start. Why? What's the organization's purpose? I mean, what impact are you going to make with your organization to the community? And what is the primary purpose of why you're starting this organization? Underneath that purpose, what services are you going to provide? Again, we mentioned this earlier about like housing. Is it specific to certain elements? Is it specific to certain geographic areas? Maybe you're only going to be able to provide certain parts of a housing situation. So you have to consider what are the services you're going to be providing, and what you have to be very clear on the what would you say, description of those services, and because those, and then the outcomes from those services, so that people understand the real meaning behind how your organization is functioning. The other thing is, where are these services going to be provided? Are they going to be provided within, say, a certain community neighborhood? Are they going to be provided to a certain demographic, like children or veterans or whatever? So you want to be real clear, because people need to understand who can apply for those services and what's the process. And then how is the services going to be delivered, which is what I'm meaning when I say process. Are they going to be provided online? Are you going to have a building that people can come into and apply for those services? Are you going to be going out into the community, like especially with the homeless, to go out into the community and find out who these homeless people are and visit with them? These are considerations that really are part of your mission, because again, your mission is tied to the impact you're going to make within the community by providing those services. And then who's going to help you provide those services? Are you going to work with volunteers? Are you going to have a staff? Are you going to be referring from one client to another? These are all considerations that are really important when you start structuring your organization and making kind of the focus or the elements that are actually going to impact the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about developing your board. I think that this is important from a small business, or even especially a nonprofit. I think that you need a working board. And by working board, I mean those people on your board who help and assist you with their experience, their knowledge, their contacts, whatever it may be. Sometimes a lawyer or a banker or somebody within the community as community representatives are really important to stimulate that board and to get you on the right track and to assist you with things that might even cost funds that the organization doesn't have, especially at the beginning. One of the primary functions of a board is whether there are two ways a board can go. A board can help you strategize your organization and develop a business plan, or you can strategize and create the business plan and present it to the board just for approval and review, and approval, and then for any other additional information that they want to provide or suggestions that they have. I think that it's important that when you're looking at your board, that you understand that their time is of value. So therefore, you don't want to have board meetings that are not of purpose. So by purpose, I mean that there should be an agenda given. There should be meetings that are held not frequently, but so that the time that the board gets together is of purpose, and they actually complete duties. They make an impact. They make decisions. They decide on where the organization is going. And it's there's some value to the board meetings themselves. So an agenda is really important. The other thing I might mention is that I think you should get the agenda out to each board member at least a week before the meeting is held, so that they can go over it and so that they in turn can understand what they want to bring to the table in the discussion. And then again, I want you to make sure that they understand that being a member of their board is public knowledge, because of the 990 forms that go out publicly, and that it's so that they are aware that they are kind of associated with the organization itself. I do think from an organizational standpoint, it's a responsibility that there's director's insurance. And by director's insurance, I mean that that allows that there is no liability to the board of director membership for anything that the organization does, unless it's a criminal act. But I mean, they are held non-responsible for the activities of the organization because they have insurance for that liability. I think it's a couple of other things to consider. As becoming a nonprofit, you have to check and make sure that your name is available. And again, I mentioned that as being a resource document within our website of SoCal, along with the blog, which tells you how to go through the process. I think it's really important to decide the organizational structure. And then this goes back to the idea that maybe you're going to have an attorney on your board of directors who can assist you with that, advise you with that, and also hopefully consider the financial aspect of maybe donating that service of helping you actually structure the organization. After you receive an EIN number, which allows you to mean that you are a business, that's a business number, it'll be necessary to then apply for the tax exemption status. And that's a separate application to the IRS. It's either on a 1023-EZ or a 1023 form. Those forms, the 1023-EZ is basically, you can do it on the website, but it has certain stipulations. There is a checklist of questions that will be given right as you open it up. And if you fall within the answers of those questions, then you can proceed to the 1023-EZ form. Otherwise, you will have to do a 1023, which is a little bit longer, and it is a little bit more substantive and has a lot more questions to be answered. Again, it's based on a questionnaire that's right at the beginning of the website instructions. You have to make sure that all the attachments are in line with the application. Usually there's a business plan that has to be provided, board of directors, financial documents, and projections, especially with the 1023 forms. The 1023-EZ just kind of has those as part of the form itself, so it kind of directs you through the process. But always make sure that you have these documents available, no matter if you're applying for, say, some kind of form such as this, or if you're actually going to consider grant funding. It's important that you gather all the information together and submit the application. And then there is a waiting period with the IRS, but they usually do email you and say that they have received it and they are looking at it so that you're aware that it's in the process of becoming a tax exempt. They may actually email you or send you a letter that states that they want additional information. And if they state for some reason that they don't feel that you're can apply for that status, you can always reapply after you answer their questions to find, to maybe you missed something in the application. These are just a few of the things that I think you need to consider when you start a nonprofit. Again, if there's any information that we can help you with, you can go to the consulting for the consultation page for an appointment to talk with one of our representatives. And we would be glad to walk you through the process or assist you in the process. Again, and also there are resources out there on the resource page. And through the blog, you'll notice that we do a step-by-step kind of a process or our information blog that relates to some of the forms that are necessary for your organization. I hope this has been beneficial, and thanks for joining us today. And have a good day. Take care.